I used to work in the banking industry, which is quite high pressurized industry, and I used to have a lot on my mind at sleep time, so I used to struggle to fall asleep. I also had sleep struggles when my son was born. That was predominantly because of his sleep, as in he wasn't sleeping, and so nor was I. And then after we resolved his sleep struggles, I became a sleep consultant for babies and children. And then I decided to also become a sleep consultant for adults and older children and adults. My particular passion is mental health, or awareness of how some of our lifestyle can affect our mental health and the things that we can do to improve our lifestyle, to improve our mental health. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor. I do refer people to therapists that have those kinds of specializations, but if I can help people that then improves that without things like intervention, medication, that type of thing, then I'm always really delighted and privileged to be able to do so. In terms of what I do now, as Anne-Marie says, I'm on a lot of podcasts. I'm sometimes on the radio, sometimes in the press. I collaborate a lot with other types of therapists. In terms of my children and baby work, there's very few people who are seeking a sleep consultant that hasn't heard about me, because I do try and provide lots of free of charge or support services to things like nurseries and schools and places where we can make a difference with just a few pieces of advice and guidance. So my one-on-one clients, it's all about very targeted help, whereas what I can do and what I do things like these workshops, is give more specific and general help. And then if what I tell you today really helps, then that's fantastic. And if what I tell you today is only part of the journey to improving your sleep, then all you need to do is reach out to me and we can talk about how I can help you more intensively. So, I have a question for the room. Is anyone here like to sleep? Okay, good. Is anyone here not like to sleep? I had a client contact me recently, says, I don't like to sleep because I feel I'm missing out on things I could be doing. And so he's got a disconnect with the benefits of sleep. So everyone here likes to sleep. Does anyone here have sleep struggles? Okay. It is not that unusual. Most of us in our lives will have some form of sleep challenges. They can vary, and I will talk a little bit about them. They can vary based on lifestyle. They can vary based on work challenges. They can vary based on family dynamic. They can also vary because we have a medical issue that prevents us from sleeping well. But quite often, our sleep challenges are as direct result of things that we are doing that we could change to make a difference. And a lot of us have had this message through media and through perhaps people that we follow in social media that says that sleep is for the weak, or sleep is something that I don't do very much of, or I look at me, aren't I great, I can still operate my life and only sleep for X number of hours a night, which is relatively speaking not enough. And it's easy to get sucked into thinking that that's the right thing. There's a lot of kind of presidents in the US in the past have said, I can run this country on 5 hours sleep a night. And my thinking there is, imagine how much more effective you'd be if you slept 8 hours a night, how much more our planet would be benefiting from you sleeping more relative to the decisions you make. So this guy here, Matthew Walker, has been known as a sleep guru when the press discusses him, or when he's mentioned in the press. He is a neuroscientist based out of the University of Berkeley, California. And his view is actually sleep isn't a luxury. It's not something we should pick and choose. It's not something we should do now and again. It's a non-negotiable, as he says, biological necessity. So, what actually is sleep? Basically, as a race, as a species, we do not really know that much about sleep. Even Matthew Walker, who's a world's leading expert on sleep, will say in his book and his podcast, I actually don't know that much about sleep, because it's a mystery subject. It's very hard to research, because where sleep is created in the brain is really inaccessible. So there's only a few ways in which we can actually research and study sleep, and we know that that doesn't give us the full picture. But what we do know is it must be vitally important, because when we are sleeping, we are very vulnerable. And evolutionarily speaking, if that was not necessary, we would have prevented ourselves from doing it over the generations and decades that we've been a species, because previously, when we were cave people, and all of the mammals that sleep who are still prey are very vulnerable when they're asleep. So obviously is a biological necessity, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. Basically, when we are sleeping, we are not, strictly speaking, purely relaxed. So a lot of people would think of sleep as a time of relaxation, as downtime, or a time when we're not, our body isn't doing anything. And what we know about sleep, what we can study, is that that's quite the opposite. We've only found that out in about the last 20 years, that a lot happens when we're asleep. A lot happens physically and a lot happens mentally. So it's not just complete and utter rest or switching off. There's a lot going on. The way that they study sleep most effectively is for people to go into a clinic and have pads put on their brain. Then they sleep in the sleep clinic, and then those pads record electromagnetic waves or energy that's kicking out from the brain. And that's why we know it's not just downtime that we're having, because there are certain periods of the night where our brain is extremely active. So those periods of the night where our brain is extremely active is vitally important for us, even though despite the fact that we feel sleep as relaxation, we understand it to be downtime. So what happens when we sleep? Things like memory, consolidation, processing of emotions, muscle relaxation, regeneration of organs, creating blood cells, obviously deep tissue relaxation, the thing that you probably associate sleep with the most. So a lot of people will come to me and say, I don't think I sleep deeply, or my sleep's not that deep, or I wake up a lot in my sleep, or I think my sleep's light, or my partner tells me I'm very active, or my child's very noisy in their sleep. And I say to them every single time, that's completely normal, and it's totally appropriate, and it's actually a good thing. Because of the night time that we sleep, of the 100% of the time that we're asleep, actually only about 20 to 30% is deep sleep. So that tells you that obviously the rest, being the 70 to 80%, is where we are potentially likely to be not still, not silent, and you have the possibility that you notice that by having these frequent wakings. So if any of you in the room are aware that in the night you wake up, turn over, go back to sleep, wake up, turn over, go back to sleep, some of you might get up and go to the bathroom, some of you might get up, well, not get up, but check your phone, see what time it is, or check your watch, and you think, oh, my sleep's really broken. The reality is that is not necessarily a problem. Okay, so just to reassure you, if you're having more deep sleep than 20 to 30%, there's a problem. There's a disconnect. That's not healthy from a sleep perspective. What's called the sleep architecture. Your sleep architecture is not healthy. And if you feel like you're having a lot of light sleep, then that is healthy from a sleep architecture perspective. I'll ask for a show of hands just for this last question. Does anyone sleep more than 8 hours a night on average? Good. Anyone sleep? It's good. Anyone sleep less than 5 hours a night on average? Less than 5 hours a night on average. Okay. That's not so good. Okay. Do you know that because you know what time you go to bed and what time you wake up, or is your night sleep fragmented? Is it fragmented? Late to bed, early to wake? Oh, fragmented. Late to bed, early to wake, or fragmented?
Late to bed.
Okay.
Yeah, late.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So the sleep needs for an adult is 6 to 8 hours. People can do fine on 6. People don't really need more than 8 on let's say 8 hours over 7 nights, for example. So give or take over the course of the week. The when is The when is personal to the individual. Okay, so we all will prefer a sleep time that we are naturally inclined to. So in my home, as soon as I turn off, I'm currently watching Yellowstone. If any of you has started Yellowstone or want a TV show to watch, Yellowstone. Have you watched it?
I'm watching it.
I'm in season 1. Where are you?
Season.
Okay. Did you like it or not sure? Okay, fine. Right, good. I hope I wasn't putting my foot in it there. We watch my husband and I watch Yellowstone. We switch the TV off. As soon as I switch the TV off, I yawn. My routine is very set. So I yawn, I go upstairs, I wash my face, brush my teeth, go to the bathroom, get dressed, get into bed. I fall asleep around 10:30. I wake up around 6:30. My natural rhythm, I mean, I've created that as well as anything else, but my natural rhythm is an 8:30 to 6:30. My husband would love to go to bed at 8:30 and wake up about 5, and that's his preference, and he forces himself to not do that. There are lots of people out there that go to bed, I'm not saying you go to bed late, maybe you wake up very early, but there's quite a lot of people out there that would prefer to go to bed at midnight, 1 or 2, and wake up later. The only problem with the midnight 1 or 2, and this might be the thing that you are facing personally, is there's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't have to get up at 6 a.m. Because if you need 8 hours a night, or if you need 6 hours a night, when you go to bed, if you think forward to 6 hours from now, if you know you have to get up because of lifestyle or work sooner than, then that is creating a situation where you are, from a sleep needs perspective, not getting enough sleep. What that happens is it changes your sleep architecture. So when I said that 20 to 30% of your night's sleep should be deep and 70 should be light, your sleep architecture won't follow those ratios because there's not enough hours in the night to honor that. So then you start to have additional issues where the memory processing piece or the muscle relaxation piece won't happen because you're not getting the required amounts of light, deep, and the other stage of sleep, which is REM sleep, or also known as dream sleep. So you would be wise to consider where you can add sleep in. Fragmented, I'll come on to in a sec. Where you can add sleep in. Can you wake up later, or can you go to bed earlier? Is it a choice of when you go to bed? If it's not a choice, if it's your natural inclination that you cannot fall asleep earlier than 1 a.m., then that is, unfortunately, is the situation you find yourself in, that you have no real control over it. But if you can control it, it would be helpful to your overall sleep need to go to bed earlier or wake up later. The problem that people who need to go to bed late have is work. So until about 200 years ago, this was not a problem for human beings. We've only really been employees for about 200 years. So prior to 200 years ago, you could control your life entirely, okay, because no one was your employer. But now you have an employer, you have to be at work at a certain time. It affects people who have the drive to go to bed late. Okay, now I've just touched on these, but I'll kind of go back and explain. This is what I'm referring to when I say drive to go to bed late. We have a chronotype, which is our natural desire to go to sleep at a certain time, and it is inherited, which means you can't do anything about it. So you have to make your peace with it. So if in this life that you are finding yourself in, your drive to go to sleep is not until 1, 2, 3, or 4 a.m., which is for a late sleeper chronotype, then the working world is really against you. Because unless you have total flexibility about when you wake up and when you go to work, obviously you're waking up perhaps way too early relative to how much sleep you need. There's a sleep calling type, which is early to bed, which my husband is kind of borderline, where people who are early to bed, which means they would like to wake up early, will go to bed between 6 and 8 p.m. and wake up between 4 and 6 a.m. And then there's people in the middle, people like me who like to go to bed at 10 and wake up about 6. Okay, so these are 3 categories of general, inherited drive to go to sleep at a certain time. The reason it's really important is when mentally you're most effective. So people who are early risers, they are mentally most effective about 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe sometimes even earlier. So when they are in their occupation, they are most productive at that time of the day. Then they're very, very less productive as the day goes on. People who are somewhat in the middle, so people like myself, we're most productive late morning to early afternoon. And then people who are late to bed, prefer to go to bed late, would prefer to wake up about 10 a.m. and be very productive between, say, 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. Well, that does not fit in with a traditional 9 to 5 occupation. And unfortunately, it's an inherited situation that you're in, that's your drive to go to sleep, unless it's decision. So for people that do go to bed late, you have to really understand whether it's your choice or there's nothing you can do about it. If it's your choice, then there is something you can do about it. If you want to do something about it, no pressure, no need to do something about it unless there's no problem. But if it's not, then the best thing you can do is find a job that starts at midday, basically. If there is such run your own business that starts at midday. The stages of sleep, which I touched on. So there are 4 sleep stages as defined by sleep scientists. The first stage of sleep is, as known as light sleep, is as light a sleep as is being awake, more or less. So when you go to the sleep clinic and they put the pads on your brain, the brain waves that they're tracking between awake and stage 1 light sleep, there's nothing to choose between them. They look identical. So that's the stage of sleep where maybe you do that and you're awake again. That's your first stage of sleep. We've probably all experienced it. I actually experienced it last night, where you just fell asleep and then something either internally or externally woke you up. Then you go into stage 2 light sleep, and you spend about 50% of your night in stage 2 light sleep. So it is vitally important. Okay, there's an awful lot that happens in stage 2 light sleep that we need as part of our drive to be asleep. Then you have deep sleep or slow wave sleep, where the brain waves change completely and they're very, very deep and elongated, and that's more about muscle and tissue repair. And then you move into a stage of sleep called REM sleep, which is known as rapid eye movement sleep. If you've ever seen anyone asleep during this stage, basically there's a lot of movement of their eyes, but their eyelids are closed, so their eyelids sort of flicker. And that is the stage that we most recognize as dream sleep. Dream sleep being hallucinogenic type stories going on in your mind, okay? The hallucinogenic element is when perhaps you wake up thinking, what the hell was that all about? There were things there that I recognized, and there are things there that were weird, and they were blended together. So it's sort of something that can be troubling, or makes you scratch your head and think, what was that for, or what was the purpose of that? What we do know about that stage of sleep is that's vital for long-term memory processing and consolidation. So people who don't sleep enough, so people who don't get a minimum of 6 hours a night, will not benefit to the same extent that people get longer from that. So a great example would be if you've been in this experience, or you know people who are cramming for exams, say a university student up all night studying, that will not help them. Because if they don't have the experience of dream sleep that night, whatever they've attempted to remember through their studying that study session will probably not get stored away in their long-term memory in the same way as if they'd have had the right amount of sleep, studied less, and basically benefited from restoring the memory of the study that they did do. And that's easy to test because you basically just keep a bunch of people awake at night and you let another bunch of people sleep and ask them to study the same thing, and the next day you ask them what they remember, and for sure the people that slept remember more than the people that didn't. So that one is one of those ones that we can actually study, but a lot of the other types of sleep, a lot of the other elements to sleep we can't. In terms of this stages, we move through these stages overnight in cycles, and the average length of a cycle for an adult is about 90 minutes. So during that 90-minute cycle, you move through these sleep stages. At the start of the night, we have most of our deep sleep, and in the early hours of the morning, we have most of our REM sleep, which is why we normally wake up remembering our dream, and which is why the start of the night is really hard to wake us up. So once you've fallen asleep, you'll have a good chunk of time where if a bomb went off next to you, you wouldn't know. And if any of you've got children, you'll probably recognize that from your children's sleep behavior. You might hear a lot of sounds early in the morning, thinking, oh, my child's about to wake up. Then they go quiet again, then you hear them again, then they go quiet again. And it's because they're in and out of dream sleep. Okay. So, not to be wanting to drag us down, guys, but there are implications to not sleeping enough, which probably all of us have got some awareness of. Going back to the comment that Matthew Walker said, in my opinion, based on the clients that I see, people come to me saying, I work really hard in the gym, I'm very, very aware of what I eat, I'm very keen to spend time with my family and be really effective at work. But then they give me a bunch of habits that aren't helpful for sleep. And I say to them, you could drop the exercise and drop the healthy eating, because at this point it's not helping you, because your sleep is such a problem area that no matter how much effort you put into going to the gym and eating really well, you're never going to catch up, because the sleep is such a powerful part of that. And it's powerful as well in these areas. So who hasn't felt a bit, let's say negative towards their employer when they know they have to go to work the next day, when they've been at the office until very late the night before because, projects, deadlines, lack of staffing, overtime that's not paid, all the kinds of things that can make us feel really negative towards our employer, not getting enough sleep, because when you get home you think, well, sleep, all that's happening when I'm asleep is I'm not enjoying myself, so I want to come home and hang out and have a glass of wine and chat to my partner and watch some TV. Then you go to bed, end up going to bed very late relative to what you would, then you have to wake up early to go back to that workplace, and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a hamster on a wheel. So that element to our lifestyle, which as employees a lot of us cannot avoid, will create in and of itself a sleep issue, because all that will happen then is when you go to bed you'll be thinking about all the things you've got to do tomorrow and you can't fall asleep, which is called sleep onset insomnia. Lifestyle choices. None of us are perfect. I can honestly, hand on heart, tell you that I look at my phone right before I turn it face down and go to sleep, but I fall asleep within 5 minutes of being in bed, because I have a blue light blocking screen on my phone, so I could look at my phone right up until the last minute, because I don't suffer from any lack of onset of melatonin as a result of the blue light. So firstly, I'm trying to walk the walk. Secondly, it's to set the alarm more often than not, to be honest. But I also know for myself that if I'm looking at content that will rev me up, then last thing I'm going to do is feel relaxed when I finally turn off the phone. Diet, exercise, this is caffeine, alcohol, none of that is good for us when it comes to sleeping well if we have a sleep struggle. Stress and anxiety, as I mentioned at the start, I'm not a psychiatrist, doctor or therapist, but some of this is as a result of not sleeping well. So what you've got to understand with your sleep, if this is having an impact, is it the anxiety or stress that's causing you not to sleep well, or you're not sleeping well, so you've got stress and anxiety going on. The second one, if you're not sleeping well, you've got stress and anxiety, I can help you with. If it's the initial one, then I would, if people come to me with that, I recommend a therapist and my services. Okay, so what can we do? I personally metabolize coffee in a way that means if I drink it after midday, it can cause me problems to fall asleep. So I try to have no coffee after midday. I have also switched to decaffeinated coffee, and typically, unless wherever I am doesn't serve decaffeinated coffee, I only drink decaffeinated coffee. Not all the time, because I was out for dinner last Saturday night, but typically it's sensible to eat smaller meals after 7 p.m. from a digestion point of view, in terms of then when you get into bed, how does that feel? Are you really comfortable? Is that going to feel nasty at 3 a.m. as well? So it's really about being cognizant of whether there's going to be an issue either at bedtime or through the night. Just so as everybody knows, I do recommend carbs at dinner. There's this kind of mixed messaging, I think, about carbs in the afternoon or carbs at dinner time, or do carbs at night make you put on weight? And I'm not saying they do or they don't. I'm saying that carbs are helpful for sleep, because carbs make us feel tired. So there are other things that make us feel sleepy: bananas, oats, milk, cherries, turkey are 5 helpful things to have at dinner time or before bed, because they're all helpful for sleep. Turn off your devices. Not to be a hypocrite, it's really up to you if you turn off your devices or not. I think the message is more about content. Sometimes, I used to watch Homeland. Have you watched Homeland? No, okay. I used to watch Homeland. That was not good for sleep at all, the content. Yellowstone, I feel like it could go that way, depending on what comes out next. Not trying to do any spoiler alerts here, but or spoilers, I should say. But it's more, I think, it's not only about content, because the reason that there is such an issue with devices is the light that is emitted from the device can suppress our melatonin. So just so you know, melatonin is a hormone that is extremely beneficial at bedtime. If you feel the effects of melatonin, or the melatonin onset needs to be absorbed, let's say, by the body in order for you to fall asleep. Melatonin production starts at sunset. So going back to that comment I mentioned about 200 years ago, we didn't have employers. When the Industrial Revolution started and Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, we ended up in a situation where we could control whether it's day or night. Okay, and now we can control whether it's day or night, because day to us means when there's light, us as a species, and night means when it's dark. So you could leave the lights on all the time, it could always be day, basically. But our brains, our somewhat ignorant brains, don't know that. And so what our brain, or what melatonin production is seeking, is darkness. And when there's darkness, melatonin production starts. So by suppressing melatonin, you are potentially delaying that feeling that the body needs in order to fall asleep. So that's the downside of devices particularly. Content won't help, but the light is also an issue. The bedtime routine tip is one that I recommend for all ages, from babies through to whatever age the person is when they come into contact with me, purely because it triggers a feeling of sleepiness. Now, my brain is triggered by turning off the television, as it happens, because that's when I do my first yawn. But that's not my routine. My routine is the order in which I get ready for bed. So if I get ready for bed typically with washing my face, brushing my teeth, using the bathroom, and then putting my pajamas on, if tonight I'm already wearing my pajamas, I then go to the bathroom, I then wash my face, and I then brush my teeth. In other words, I do that in completely a different order. I will not fall asleep as quickly because my brain doesn't recognize that pattern. It recognizes the pattern that I do every other night, and this new pattern is new, and it has to accept and learn that new pattern. So a routine is the same thing in the same order. Whatever that routine looks like for you is what your brain will expect if you do it over and over. Tip 5, good ideas to improve your sleep environment. So we evolved as a species sleeping in caves, so we should be sleeping in caves. That means cold and dark. Our bedroom is at 18 degrees on the AC, okay? Everybody who doesn't appreciate the coldness of a cold room always gives me a what the look when I say that. That doesn't mean we're cold. It means that our physical room temperature is 18 and I'm wearing pajamas and we have 2 quilts on the bed and we're snugly in. My son is exactly the same. His room is the same temperature. He's 8 years old. He goes to bed at the moment with a hot water bottle, which if none of you know what that is, it's a really old-fashioned thing to do to warm up the bed, but which I had when I was a kid, and my mum and my grandma had. Basically, his bed is warm. So I put this warm water bottle in his bed. He gets into bed, into a warm bed, even though the room is cold. He's under a cover in pajamas. So cold room, dark room. Dark room means literally when you wake up in the morning, you wouldn't know if it was the middle of the night. The kind of hotel room effect, I think of it as, because most hotel rooms have got total blackout. And so when you wake up, you're completely disoriented because you forgot you checked into a hotel yesterday and you don't know what's going on because it's super dark. It should be super dark. You should not be able to see your hand in front of your face in your bedroom, even if it's 12 midday. So those 2 elements can be enough to make a big difference. Too easy to fall asleep, certainly, and stay asleep depending on what time you wake up. Okay. I want to just touch on the fragmented sleep thing, and you might have different issues. It isn't that unusual. It can depend on these sleep stages, like I said, so it's quite normal in a light sleep period to wake up, notice and go back to sleep, wake up, notice, go back to sleep. What can happen is you wake up so frequently over so many nights, it becomes like a habitual thing to do. And it will depend on what you do when you wake up as to whether it's not problematic, but whether you're making it more of a problem. So things that you shouldn't do is look at your phone or look at the clock and realise that you've either got loads of hours left to sleep or not very long left to sleep. So clock avoidance is actually a recommended, let's say, piece of advice relative to people who wake up a lot. If you wake up and you need to go to the bathroom, then you need to restrict your liquids, okay? Because there isn't really a need for us to need, as adults who've matured, we shouldn't really need to go to the bathroom overnight. If you wake up and you spend a long time awake, okay, which is more than 20 minutes, the advice is to get out of bed. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through this. People, sometimes they wake up and then they lie there trying to get back to sleep and they get really frustrated and they don't fall back to sleep quickly and they start to talk themselves into something that isn't really there but has now become a real thing. I'm not going to fall asleep. This is going to be a terrible night. Tomorrow's at work's going to be tough. How am I going to manage? I'm going to have to cancel going to the gym. I'm going to have to, not do this or not do that because I'm not sleeping well. Basically, you've woken yourself up and you've also created in your own mind, and our mind is powerful, a story that will then become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it will also create a very negative relationship with your bed and your bedroom, such that the next night when you go into your bedroom, you might start thinking, am I going to have another bad night's sleep? Maybe I will. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen when I wake up in the middle of the night? And guess what? Your mind will then wake up in the middle of the night as a result of that self-talk. And it will carry on and carry on. And before long, you'll not have a great relationship with your bedroom. So the thinking behind, if you're awake in the middle of the night or even at bedtime and you're not asleep in 20 minutes, is to get up, go to another room, do something pleasant, relaxing, enjoyable, which isn't watching TV, or because that isn't pleasant or relaxing. That's just our way of switching off from having to think about our life. So something pleasant and relaxing, listening to music, listening to a book, reading a book, drinking something, talking to someone on the phone if you've got family or friends in another geographical location, until you feel sort of at peace again and tired, and then going back to bed. Because what you're trying to do is disassociate a negative experience with your bed and bedroom, and you're also trying to take yourself out of the bedroom to tire yourself out, because unfortunately lying there isn't that tiring. And so what happens is you get into this sort of plateau almost of, I'm not tired. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm not tired. I'm in the place where I should be comfortable and should be able to sleep, but I'm not tired and I can't sleep. And getting up and getting out of the room, and I'm not saying be active, you don't need to go for a run, but doing something else will actually make you fall back to sleep quicker if you find that you're awake for a long period of time overnight. Okay? Is that what's going on, or is there something else going on? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I've got a 2-year-old.
Yeah, well, fine. Okay, so it's not your fault. Okay. Okay.
So yeah, so I think it's just since his birth, I've just been so used to having that feeling.
Yeah.
He's still in and out of our bed,
Uh-huh.
and then having to just automatically ensure that he's not wet.
Mm-hmm.
So last thing I want is him having still happening.
Yeah, okay. So let me say this in the nicest possible way. It's not your problem, it's his problem. But it's your problem because you're a parent. So that was definitely an issue I had where my son wasn't sleeping. So had he been asleep, I would have been asleep. But if he wasn't asleep, then I wasn't asleep. And once you become a parent, it's really hard to switch your mind off to the responsibility of, are they okay, are they okay, are they okay, for that whole period of time when you're not together, because obviously if they're in their bed and you're in yours, you're not together. It will come. I can sleep better now, and he's 8, so it might take a while. But it will come with time. But I think the question I'd ask you to think about is my child's sleep having so much of an impact on me that I need to address their sleep in order to address my sleep? Because what you've described is a thing that hundreds of families come to me with. And toddlers are 40% of the children I work with. So believe me, you're not alone. Maybe if that gives you any comfort.
No, now it's better. I mean, he's sleeping through the night. It's me waking up to ensure he's not wet.
But why would he be wet? That's the problem. At his age, should not be drinking any milk at all. Yeah, there you go. So if you want to talk about that, then let me know. But that again, that's what most parents of toddlers come to me with. Double diaper is a quick fix. One on top of the other. He won't leak through that.
I don't actually care him wetting the bed. I don't want him being wet.
Then stop the milk, and then he won't be wet. I can give you an answer to all of these, but I mean, it's whether or not you want to really get into the meat of it.
Yeah, but that is a battle.
Yeah.
You're right, I do need to.
The time will come when you're ready to make a change.
So then, what do you think about being like a power nap? Like, what's your take on power nap? Power nap?
Yeah. A power nap is fine. It should be 20 minutes at the midpoint of your day. So the midpoint of my day is about 2 o'clock. And I could have a power nap at 2 o'clock for 20 minutes and it wouldn't affect my night's sleep. And the way you do a power nap is you lay down and you set your alarm for 30 minutes hence, because it should take you about 10 minutes to fall asleep and you only need 20 minutes. But it should be at the midpoint of your day. So just to be clear, if the clock is 24 hours and you need to be asleep for 8, that leaves 16 hours of the day. So in the 8-hour point, you take a 20-minute power nap. And then it won't affect your night's sleep. The problem with naps is if it affects your night's sleep, you're then napping at the wrong time of day and your night's sleep isn't improved. For people who can only ever get 5 hours of sleep a night because they fall asleep late and their job means they have to wake up early, a nap is actually recommended. So that would be your solution, is napping, basically, for 2 hours.
But can we think then of 8 hours as a stock? And if we sleep 3 hours during the day, we need only 5 during the night, something like that. Is it additive?
It isn't. Well, first of all, not everybody can sleep for 3 hours during the day. So part of the problem is that there's something called, there's a few elements in place. Some of them are hormonal and some of them are internal. There are hormones that are needed in order for us to fall asleep. So during that 3 hour nap, they are not present because some of them only occur at night. The drive to sleep is an internal one, and it comes both with a personal circadian rhythm, so a personal internal clock, but also a drive to fall asleep due to how long you've been awake. So what will happen is you feel tired, but you're not tired enough to fall asleep. You're not tired enough to sleep for 3 hours. So that fragmented, well, that compromise, or that composition of 3 hours and 5 hours potentially won't work because you won't be tired enough to sleep for the 3 hours. And then what will happen is if you delay it and then you to try and get to a point where you're tired enough for 3 hours, when you get to bedtime, you're not tired enough to sleep. So the day layout is quite an important one. If it's a 5 hour overnight or even less, then there's much more day. So if you think about 24 hours, if you only have 5 hours of night, you've got 19 hours of day. So you can slot a nap in potentially, yes, but you probably wouldn't get to a sweet spot where plus minus the nap, there's enough time to build up the tiredness and to build up the tiredness again. Okay, make sense?
Well, it makes sense. I think there's some certain cultures who do siesta, you know.
Well, now, that is true, and there is a lot of research that looks at, as a species...
And maybe that's not sleep, that's something else.
Yeah, they're not always sleeping in their siestas, are they?
No, not
No, they're not, though. But...
Well, you were the one who tell us we need to do something that is pleasing.
Well, yeah, and well, that was it, exactly. That's what a lot of people do to get them to sleep. But going back to so as a species, we evolved much more than we're the species we are now, right? So our backstory is much longer than this current journey we're on, let's call it. And there's a lot of evidence to say that we used to go to bed at sunset, which was obviously in this region pretty early, relatively speaking, to Europe, and sleep for a good chunk, and then wake up and have a 2 or 3 hour hiatus in the middle of the night, and then sleep again, and then wake up and do the day, okay? Which is kind of a siesta, but overnight. And that's, there is evidence that that is what we, as a species, evolved from, and so maybe prefer. With regards to siesta, it is supposedly meant to be after lunch. So it's it's meant to be this sort of 2 hour, this middle of the day, 20-minute power nap. It's just evolved. So now for a lot of cultures, so using Spain as the example, it's about 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock, which isn't really what it necessarily is if it's after lunch, but it depends on when lunch is, it depends on when your circadian drive to sleep is, all of that. As long as you get the composition of the amount of sleep, but there is no melatonin at siesta time, and the melatonin is the what can I say, key, let's say, to falling asleep. So not everybody can take the siesta as well. Do you want me to talk about it? Did you have anything to ask?
Could I ask,
Okay.
Claudine, would you mind, just because we have another session?
Yep.
If anyone has questions for you,
Yeah.
we can just go maybe over there, or is that okay?
Of course.
We have...